Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in, really digging deep into something fundamental for business planning, realistic budgeting. We're moving past just guesswork. We're looking at the actual statistical tools, and interestingly, the behavioral ones, too, used to, forecast costs and revenues accurately.
That's right.
Our source material today, it's a really solid breakdown of these estimation techniques, the kind of vital for effective performance management.
Absolutely essential stuff.
And our mission for you listening isn't just to define these tools like, say, the high-low method or the learning curve effect. It's about giving you that strategic edge, the insight needed to actually critique them.
Yeah.
Because we really need to know where these models, where they fall short.
And that inability to critique, that's often exactly what sinks the budget, isn't it?
Right.
People trust the model too much.
Right.
The source material, it lays out this estimation landscape really into 4 critical pillars you need to get your head around. Forecasting methods, time series analysis, correlation and regression, and that really dynamic learning curve effect.
4 big ones.
And if you don't understand the inherent risks, the limitations of each one, you're basically flying blind with your budget.
Okay, well, let's unpack this right away then. Starting with maybe the simplest tool under forecasting methods, the high-low method.
Good place to start.
Our sources point to 2 main techniques here. These complex statistical models on one hand, and then this rapid, almost initial estimate you get from high-low. We all kind of know its utility, right? I mean, it's the fastest way to try and split fixed costs from variable costs.
It absolutely is. It's the ultimate, let's say, quick and dirty estimation tool.
Quick and dirty, yeah.
You literally just take your highest activity point, your lowest activity point, find the slope between them, and boom, that's your variable cost rate.
Simple calculation.
Super simple. But the real insight here isn't the math. It's the profound risk you take if you use it for anything more than just a preliminary check. A quick look.
Okay, so what is that massive risk then? Why is it just preliminary?
Well, think about it. It completely ignores every single piece of data you have, except for those 2 extreme points.
Ah, right. Everything in the middle is just gone.
Exactly. So imagine your lowest output month. Maybe that was because of a huge supply chain mess up, right? A one-off event.
Okay.
And your highest month. Maybe that involved crazy, unusual overtime costs to rush some critical order out the door.
Also an outlier.
Both outliers. And the high-low method forces your entire cost structure to fit those 2 possibly very weird points. So you could end up budgeting based on a really skewed, inefficient version of reality. It's great for speed, yeah, but potentially terrible for accuracy if those outliers are messing things up.
That's a really fantastic distinction. Okay, so if high-low is just the fast check, we definitely need something, more robust when we look at spending over time.
Definitely.
Which brings us nicely to time series analysis. This is tracking and predicting future values based purely on historical data patterns, right?
That's the core idea. Time series is essential because cost behavior, it isn't static. It changes. And for a prediction based on history to be reliable, you absolutely have to break down that historical data into its, let's call them structural components.
Why is that so critical? Why break it down?
Because if you just look at the raw numbers, the total cost month by month, you might easily mistake a temporary spike, maybe just a seasonal thing, for a permanent trend. And that leads to bad decisions.
Okay, so it sounds less like just forecasting and more like, I don't know, financial archaeology. Decomposing the past.
I like that. Financial decomposition, yeah. And there are 4 key structural elements you need to isolate for a proper time series analysis.
All right, what are they?
First, you isolate the underlying trend. Is your production volume or maybe revenue generally sloping upwards or downwards over long haul, like years?
Okay, the big picture direction.
Exactly. Second is the cycle. Now, these are longer-term ups and downs, often tied to the broader economy. Think recessions or booms. They last more than a year, but they aren't tied strictly to the calendar months.
Got it. Trend cycle. What's next?
Third is seasonal variations. This is the predictable noise, the rhythm within the year.
Like retail sales.
Perfect example. The spikes you see every 4th quarter for holiday demand, or maybe a dip every summer if your industry slows down then.
Yeah.
These are calendar-bound, predictable patterns within the year.
Okay. Trend, cycle, seasonal, and the last one.
And finally, the tricky one, the real wild card. Random fluctuations. These are the events that, frankly, no model can really predict. A sudden lawsuit, a freak weather event shutting down logistics, a surprise new regulation, a global pandemic.
Yeah.
You get the idea.
The unknowns. That distinction between cycle and seasonality seems really key for budgeting, though.
Oh, absolutely.
If I see a drop in sales, is it because we're in a cyclical downturn for the whole economy, or is it just because it's, January and things are always slow then?
Exactly right. And knowing that difference dictates your response, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you plan major cost cuts because it's a recession cycle?
Yeah.
Or do you just ride it out because, things pick up in March? Seasonal.
Makes sense.
So to get that clarity, you have to do associated tasks, like working with deseasonalized data.
Okay. Tell us a bit more about that. Why remove the seasonal noise? What does that achieve?
You strip out that predictable seasonal pattern so you can actually see the true underlying trend and cycle more clearly.
Ah, I see.
If you're trying to budget for real, sustainable growth, you don't want to confuse that predictable Christmas sales spike with genuine operational improvement, right?
Right. You don't want to pat yourself on the back for something that happens every year anyway.
Precisely. Deseasonalizing helps you see if your underlying year-over-year efficiency or market position is truly improving.
Yeah.
Only then can you really perform the final forecasting with any confidence.
There's always a but.
There's always a but. The usefulness of the whole time series approach, it kind of hits a wall with that fourth component.
Yeah.
This random fluctuation.
The unpredictable stuff.
Yeah. And this is crucial. Without a really thorough analysis of the failure modes of this technique, its limitations, you might end up trusting a forecast that simply cannot account for, say, a major geopolitical shift or a sudden tech disruption.
So it's dangerous if you over-rely on it.
Very dangerous. Budgeting purely on historical time series data essentially assumes the future will look a lot like the past. And, well, that's often a very risky bet these days.
Okay, so the task is clear. Budget based on reality. Factor in history, but don't just rely on history.
Well put.
Now, let's shift gears a bit. We've covered looking backward in time with time series. But here's where I think it gets really interesting. We move from tracking history to trying to quantify the relationships between different variables using statistical tools.
Yes.
We're talking correlation and regression.
Exactly. This is moving from what happened when to trying to understand what causes what, or at least what moves with what.
A different level of analysis.
It is. We're stepping into more of a statistical modeling world here. We try to build a functional relationship, like a predictive equation, between an independent variable, the potential cause, maybe like advertising spend, and a dependent variable, the effect we care about, like sales revenue.
Okay, trying to link actions to outcomes.
Precisely. And to figure out if that predictive relationship is actually strong enough to base your budget on, we rely heavily on two key metrics.
All right, what are they?
Well, the first one is the correlation coefficient.
Right, that measures the strength and the direction of a relationship. Like, +1 means they move perfectly together, -1 perfectly opposite, 0, no linear link.
Correct. Simple measure of association. But, and this is important, correlation just tells you if they're connected somehow. It doesn't tell you how good your prediction will be. That's where the second metric comes in, which is absolutely critical if you're trying to defend a budget proposal. That's the coefficient of determination.
Often called R-squared, right?
This is the one, R-squared.
So let's make that practical. If my R-squared is high, say 0.90, what does that actually mean for me as a budget manager?
Okay, 8.90 R-squared means that 90% of the movement, the variation, in your predicted variable, let's stick with sales revenue, can be statistically explained by the changes in your predictor variable, say advertising spend in this case.
Wow, 90% explained. That sounds pretty good.
It is good. That 90% is essentially your measure of confidence in the model's predictive power within the data you used. If you're trying to convince leadership, hey, if we increase the marketing budget, sales will go up, that R-squared is the number you lead with.
It's the evidence.
It's your statistical proof, or at least strong suggestion, that the regression model you built is a strong predictor. It quantifies the fit.
Okay, that adds some serious statistical rigor to the financial conversation. But, statistical models are famous for their pitfalls. Where does this tool, this approach, tend to break down? What are the limitations?
Oh yeah, you absolutely have to know the limitations. We must highlight the key ones.
Go for it.
Well, the oldest warning in statistics is probably the most relevant one in budgeting too. Correlation does not equal causation.
The classic trap.
Absolutely. You might find a really high correlation between, say, your local ice cream sales and the number of drownings.
Okay. Weird example, but yeah.
But one doesn't cause the other, right? A third variable, hot weather, causes both more swimming and more ice cream eating.
Got it. So making budget decisions based on mistaken cause and effect.
It's incredibly dangerous. You could invest heavily based on a spurious correlation.
What else?
Secondly, Regression, just like high-low, but maybe more subtly, is highly susceptible to those darn outliers we talked about.
Again with the outliers.
They just mess everything up. One single rogue data point, way off the pattern, can dramatically tilt that regression line. And that makes a model that looks statistically robust on paper, maybe with a high R-squared even, potentially unreliable in practice, especially if you try to project that line way outside the range of your actual data. You're extrapolating based on a potentially flawed line.
So understand the model, but also understand the data behind the model and its weaknesses.
You got it. Context is everything.
Okay, we've covered models looking at time, models looking at static relationships. Let's pivot now to the final and maybe the most, human pillar, the learning curve effect.
Yes, a fascinating one.
This feels critical for any organization that relies on repetitive human tasks. I'm thinking manufacturing, maybe even service industries, starting a big new project.
Definitely. Anywhere people learn by doing.
The core idea seems simple, but really powerful. The learning effect and its underlying principle basically says that the time taken per unit goes down as the total cumulative output goes up.
That's in a nutshell.
People just get faster, right? Like you find shortcuts, they get smoother, they refine the process naturally.
So the formal recognition that experience itself is a measurable, tangible, cost-reducing asset, which is huge for planning.
How so?
Well, think about preparing a competitive bid for a big new product contract. If it involves a lot of labor and you don't factor in this learning effect, this efficiency gain, your bid's going to be way too high. You'll price yourself out.
Because you're assuming the 1,000th unit takes as long as the first unit.
Which it almost never does. So applying this in budgeting means you need to calculate the rate of that efficiency improvement, the learning curve rate.
Okay, how does that work?
So if your team is on, say, an 80% learning curve, that's a common one, it means every time the cumulative production doubles, the time required for that last unit in the doubled batch is only 80% of the time required for the last unit before the doubling.
Okay, so it gets progressively faster, but maybe by smaller amounts each time?
Exactly. The absolute time saving decreases, but the rate is constant for each doubling. And you figure out that rate using specific calculation methods, often based on pilot runs or industry data. That rate then tells you how rapidly your labor costs should actually drop.
Wow, that's a massive shift in how you budget for certain things. You're actively planning for continuously decreasing costs per unit, not just fixed or variable costs.
Totally different mindset for those specific cost elements.
So where are the most useful applications for this concept in practice?
Primarily, as I said, in estimating labor time and cost for large new contracts or projects. Also, setting realistic internal performance targets for teams starting something new.
How does it help with targets?
Well, if you know you're going to produce, say, 10,000 units of brand new component, and you know the learning rate, you can project pretty accurately the expected labor hours needed for unit number 5,000, unit 7,000, unit 10,000.
Ah, okay.
That's incredibly valuable information for planning, staffing, and performance management, and it's completely inaccessible if you're just using standard static cost models.
Right. Standard costing assumes efficiency is flat from the start.
Which it rarely is for new, complex tasks.
But surely human learning isn't infinite, right? There must be a ceiling to this improvement, some constraints we need to budget around.
Oh, absolutely. There are crucial constraints, crucial limitations of the learning curve. You can't just assume it goes on forever.
What stops it?
First, the effect really only applies strongly while there's genuine potential for improvement, meaning while production volume is still ramping up and the processes are still being actively learned and refined.
So what disrupts that?
Well, if you have really high staff turnover, for instance, new people keep coming in who have to start learning from scratch, or if the product design changes constantly or the process gets rejigged, then the learning curve gets interrupted, maybe even reset, and the cost reduction effect stalls or disappears.
Okay, stability is key for it to work.
Stability and repetition, yes.
Yeah.
And secondly, there's the concept of the steady state.
The plex.
Exactly. It's the unavoidable leveling off point. Eventually, the workers, the team, they've achieved the maximum practical efficiency allowed by the current tools, the current methods, the physical limits of the task. They just can't get significantly faster without a major change in technology or process.
So the curve flattens out.
It effectively flattens. At this point, the unit time and cost stop decreasing much, if at all. And if you're budgeting for costs beyond that steady state point, you have to switch back time, You revert to using a fixed efficient time per unit, and you stop applying that continuous reduction factor.
Got it. You have to know when to stop using the learning curve model itself.
Precisely. Knowing when it applies and when it stops is critical.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What does this all mean for you, the listener? We've covered these 4 really vital areas for effective estimation. We talked about the speed versus risk of high-low, the complexity of decomposing time series data, the confidence metrics you get from regression analysis, and this unique cost-saving potential of the learning curve effect.
Yeah, a good toolkit.
These really feel like the tools that determine whether your budget ends up being, I don't know, a work of fiction or a truly functioning roadmap for the business.
That's a good way to put it. And tying it right back to our mission at the start, all these powerful methods, right? Whether we're using simple models like high-low, complex stats like regression, or these behavioral things like the learning curve, they all require a really deep, practical appreciation of their specific strengths, sure, but maybe even more importantly, their limitations.
Knowing where they break.
Knowing exactly where they break and why. The most skilled budgeters, the really effective performance managers, they don't just calculate. They critically evaluate their own assumptions, their data inputs, the models themselves.
It's about judgment, not just math.
Absolutely. True knowledge here is knowing when your model might be leading you astray, when it's no longer reflecting the messy reality of the real world.
Fantastic point. And since you mentioned reality, that time series analysis, it demands we account for those unpredictable, random fluctuations, right? The stuff models can't predict.
Yep. The unavoidable noise.
So that raises a final, maybe provocative thought for you all to chew on. If, say, 15% of your sales movement is statistically unexplained by even your best regression model, that's your unexplained noise or random element, how much of your contingency budget should really be explicitly set aside just to mitigate the impact of those highly unpredictable, fundamentally unknown events? How do you budget for true randomness?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something to think about.